it was 2-0 going on about 8-0. That first half, that was what Germany did to Brazil in the 2014 World Cup semi-final.
It threatened to be that, didn't it? There was a point where you thought, God, this is going to get bad for them really, really quickly. there was a point where Alexander Isak was through on goal, and he tried a little dink when he might have been sort of better suited doing kind of anything else, but you got the impression that he thought, I'm going to get loads of chances tonight. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this one. Yeah, see if I can pull off something a bit spectacular.
I've always fancied doing one of these. His disallowed goal was he finished with aplomb as well, but
yeah, I mean, it was player.
Yeah, I mean, he's a real purple patch at the moment. I mean, Manchester United, Gary Neville described them as the worst pound for pound team in the country. It's a damning comment, but it's a fair one because yes, Newcastle United were good and they've been in decent form recently, and the way that they're going up the Premier League table, they fancy a bit of Champions League football next season, and you wouldn't put it past them. However, they're good. They're as good as they were. Manchester United, I would say, were even worse.
Oh yeah, they made it. They made it kind of easy for a very, very good team to just dominate them in the midfield in particular. Yeah. That midfield three of Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali and Joelinton, they were just the grown-ups, weren't they? They were just completely in charge of that game. It all stemmed from there. And obviously, one of the major talking points in the game is a direct result of that, which is Joshua Zirkzee getting the hook, so they could get Kobbie Mainoo in and change it. But before that happened, we were thinking this might be 4 before half time. Yeah. I don't think it's too kind of sensationalist to say that. The fact that the manager made a substitution like that after half an hour or whatever it was is if anyone's listening and didn't see the game, that is a perfect illustration of quite how bad it looked like it was going to be.
I mean, how many times do you see first half substitutions? It's very, very rare. I think we saw one in the last World Cup final, and obviously we've seen maybe 1 or 2 in the Premier League this season. But my goodness, if we were playing top trumps and you slapped down Joelinton or Sandro Tonali or Bruno Guimaraes, right? You put down just one of them in front of me, and I had Casemiro and Christian Eriksen in my hand. I don't think even if I put both of them down, that they would trump that. What on earth is Amorim playing at? I understand that he knows more about football than I'll ever know, and I'm totally fine with that. The man, what he did at Sporting was brilliant. He is a Manchester United manager on merit, and it can't get any worse than this. It just can't. Why on earth is he thinking to himself? And I know he's got his system, and people talk about that all the time. Fine. Everyone in that stadium knew you've got a midfield three there, and people have talked about it being unbalanced and can Guimaraes play with Tonali and blah, blah, and all this sort of stuff. And Eddie Howe didn't. He rubbished a lot of what was it? Carragher was saying recently. Certainly answered back. Well, they've answered back on the pitch. But why on earth does Amorim see that and go, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put Eriksen in there, and I'm going to put Casemiro in there, and we should be okay with that. Do you know what I mean? That among my other tactics, I think that will win us the game. How has he come to that decision?
Yeah,
that's not the manager, Zirkzee, coming off.
Completely. I understand that he's working out his team and which players can perform which tasks, but surely there's a bit of due diligence. We've seen from the Ten Hag era that those two in particular in that role, it doesn't work. And as you say, especially against a team like this, I mean, they were so easy to play against. And this has been a problem, with Man United for a long time, with all the shots they were conceding under Ten Hag and stuff. But it looks kind of, I think it's worse at this point, isn't it? This might well be the nadir of it, or perhaps Anfield on Sunday will be the nadir of it. We often see this in a situation where a manager comes in and the players aren't his, and the systems unit, etc., etc., etc. But
not the 7-0 before Anfield. You're saying it could get even worse than that.
Marcus, the right back is shooting from corners, right? And that looks like he's taking the piss, doesn't it? Maybe a little bit, he is taking the piss, but it's also very pragmatic because they've conceded 2 goals directly from corners recently.
It got to that Kieran Trippier was having pot shots from corners. I mean, Charlie Adam was sitting there watching that game going, I wish I was still playing. Absolutely, yeah. It is astonishing. It really is astonishing how bad this is. And that midfield, again, we can highlight so many areas of the pitch. We could highlight the defending for those goals.
Yeah, Martinez had another one to forget.
But let me just go back to the midfield for a second. There's been a gaping gap in that Manchester United midfield for a while now. How on earth does... He has to be more... I understand that when a manager comes in, they've got their ideals and they've got all this kind of stuff. And it was put to Amorim before the game. Did you want to come in? There's rumours and there's chat that you wanted to come in at the start of next summer when the season's finished. You get one more season at Sporting. That would be better for them. It'd be better for you. And he kind of said, well, that's not what happened, so there's no point in talking about that. So he obviously thought, I've got to take the job now. Well, get in there and have an element of pragmatism. You know your team is shit, okay, and the players are putting in these terrible performances. Why then expose those two midfielders who have had fine careers, by the way? They're both decent players. Casemiro, as we talked about, but Eriksen, I feel a bit harsh slagging them off, but they're just a total mismatch against those guys.
Because you're only pointing out what we're clear for everyone to see.
Suddenly I'm showing a bit of remorse after what I've just been saying. I really, really don't get it. And as you say, he makes that substitution, and it was met with quite a cheer when Mainu came on. The crowd, no. Fans aren't stupid. Well, fans aren't stupid. They see their team week in, week out, and they know what they need. And poor old Xerxes as well. I mean, he was given a ripple of applause, to be fair, by some of the fans.
And I do think it is tactical in that instance, isn't it?
Well, what does that do for his confidence?
Absolutely.
Not that he's, he's scored a few goals this season, but here's this for a stat, right? Ruben Amorim, since his first game in charge on the 24th of November, only Southampton have lost more games in all competitions among Premier League clubs than Manchester United. And they've also, Manchester United, conceded the joint most goals, 21 with Spurs. Currently, this is worse than when Ten Hag was in charge. Now, let me just quickly say, Jim, before you respond to that, I'm not saying Amorim's a bad manager. He hasn't suddenly become a bad manager. It shows you what a tough job this is. But any kind of new manager bounce, any kind of lift, just is not there.
Yeah, I mean, it's uncharted waters for Amorim, isn't it? Obviously, he's done really, really well at Sporting, but this is a completely different type of job. And you're parachuted in halfway through a season where it's an absolute crisis already. There's so much to figure out. There's so many different sideshows around the club. The pressure's massive. It's just constant. And it is really, it puts a microscope on what a massive job it is to untangle all of this and make any sort of sense out of it. Now, Luke has been saying all season they are a mid-table side, and that obviously, the table will tell you that as much as Luke will tell you that. But they're never going to be judged as one, are they? So this seems like an absolute crisis, an absolute disaster. Any of the other teams around them losing to Newcastle, there's no shame in it. But that is, unfortunately for them, where they've fallen to, isn't it? There is so far to go. Now, I understand they don't have Ugarte, who's someone you probably put in that situation. You don't have Bruno Fernandes, who's by far their most creative player. I feared for them without Fernandes. I thought they'd, unlikely to have any much of a chance without him, putting those passes in. But again, as you say, we all know what happens when you put Eriksen and Casemiro in that situation. And it's kind of baffling to me that he's not started with Mainu there, because this was always going to happen.
Yeah,
it feels like, I don't know whether he's kind of giving them too much information or whether this is kind of the payoff where, we see it happen with managers all the time. It's like, it's going to be kind of bad for a while. We're going to lose some games while you get up to speed on how the system works. Perhaps it's just that. And as I mentioned earlier, it feels like more of a crisis than it is because it's Man United. But it is...
it's a full-blown crisis.
It's not getting any better anytime soon, is it? It is worse than under Ten Hag. It looked like? It looked like a big puppy that doesn't know how big it is playing with an older dog and getting rougher than the older dog's comfortable with, like a little older dog that's just overwhelmed.
That's right.
It's like, oh God, my time has come.
Well, I understand the point as well, that if you put in Kobbie Mainoo in that team, it's not like, Manchester United are going to be a lot better against that Newcastle United side.
Well, to be fair, they were, though.
Well, already 2-0 down at that point. But the point is, how can you start like that? And then you look at the defending for them in that first goal with Martinez. Maguire, who...
So basic,
Maguire turns around and looks at Martinez and he's like, why are you not marking him? Why have you not tracked him? And Carragher pointed it out on Sky Sports. He said he can't see the ball, so he looks he doesn't look goal side, so he's with the man, because the ball's going to be crossed in. It's not like he's going to be offside. He looks the other way. It's such a basic error. And these players, I mean, Martinez is a World Cup winner, for crying out loud. The whole thing, if you're a Manchester United fan, you're tearing your hair out. I don't get it. How it can be this bad. We've seen the team that you support, Arsenal, over the years, of course, crying out for a defensive midfielder. We remember that. They weren't that robust. And I remember at the time, a lot of people were saying, it's similar to what you said earlier. They said, they're not quite mid-table, but they probably are the 5th or 6th best team in the league at the moment. You're looking at the badge, you're not looking at the players in the shirts. And obviously this is towards the end of Wenger's reign. But they were still knocking on the door of Champions League every year. Do you know what I mean?
They had an eighth place finish.
Fine, but the type of performance that Manchester United put in there, we saw it against Bournemouth as well. We've seen it all over the shop. It's the levels of embarrassment that I can't get my head around. How piss poor it is.
And also, as well, you're right to say that, because that has been a kind of facet of recent Man United teams, isn't it? And, Amorim is immune from that for a little while. But that substitution is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it starts to look bad pretty early on. I mean, Mr. Burns is pretty trigger happy. Is it that bad yet? Is his job under threat? Or is he going to, sack a load of kind of regular staff just to make himself feel better tomorrow?
I wonder if Amorim will start to think soon, why on earth did I leave Sporting? For crying out loud? I mean, look, I still think it's a good appointment ultimately. But tonight was the first time I thought, oof, you look like you've caught the bug as well. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing has finally got to you. I mean, Manchester United will end this year in 14th place in the Premier League, their lowest position at the turn of a year in the league since 1989. That year they finished 15th. They were 15th then, and they finished 13th. But Jim, I want to put this to you. If you look below Manchester United in the league, Palace looking.
Sorry, let me just scroll down.
Yeah, Palace looking a little bit better than what they started. Everton are sort of fairly hard to beat, I suppose. Wolves with their new manager looking a bit more likely. Ipswich got a very good win against Chelsea, of course. Manchester United now 7 points off the drop zone. In the words of Beefy Botham, what are you thinking?
Tremendous, by the way. I'm not thinking they're going to get relegated, Marcus. I know you want to just have this little thought exercise.
I think they're on the verge.
You think they're on the verge? I mean, let's be honest, they're going to get pumped at Anfield, aren't they? But Palace have got Chelsea next, so although Chelsea are having a wobble that we'll come on to, I think that there's a good chance Chelsea win that. It's the teams down there are so unreliable. I don't think even they can give us this festival of banter. Let's call it.
Let me say for the record as well that I genuinely don't dislike Manchester United. There's very few clubs I actually genuinely dislike, if any. And if they could turn it around, I would. I actually would quite like to see Old Trafford pumping again in a kind of in a sort of a weird way, and I would applaud Amorim if he managed to really try to turn it around and so on. Massive club, huge history, great club, all that kind of stuff. So please, hear me right. This is not me, sticking the boot in.
Yeah, you're not. It's not the Schadenfreude that it might be from, say, I don't know, me.
Yeah, exactly. You lived through. Sir Alex Ferguson stopped Arsenal from winning titles and stuff.
He did.
Winning cups.
Yeah.
But
do I enjoy Gary Neville having to watch it every time? I'll leave that up to you to guess.
Yeah. But I just want to say, it's a bit like with Man City this season as well. It was slightly different. To see a big mighty beast turning up and getting slapped about, it just is utterly intriguing, and it is absorbing stuff. It really is.
I'm not really sure of an equivalent before. Maybe that one really strange season Chelsea had, where it kind of all fell apart under Mourinho, and Eden Hazard seemed to take a season off of being the player he was at the time. But even then, there was a sense that was only temporary. This is more like kind of the result of a long decline, isn't it? And, joking aside, I'm the same, really. Even in the second half, when they started to actually get a bit of control in the game for the sort of first 20 minutes of the second half, part of me was like, go on, United. It'd be brilliant if they turn this around, just because you are ultimately a neutral, aren't you, apart from the team that you're invested in. But yeah, part of me always thinks when a new manager comes in, like, oh, this will be the guy to turn it around. Oh, it's not going to last. It's like, you might as well laugh at it while you can and enjoy the kind of strangeness of it. But it's happened a lot now, hasn't it? And clearly, there is so much to be fixed, as we keep saying, but it's not just the players, is it? They've got to get this boardroom structure right, and even that seems a mess at the moment.
It really is a mess.
The moment two people disagree, one of them's out the door. Like, it's.
What did you think of? What do you think of the whole Marcus Rashford situation? He was actually in the squad today. He was an unused sub.
Yeah.
But very interesting words from journalist Andy Mitten. Now, Andy Mitten is huge Manchester United fan, of course. He's been writing about the club for many, many years. Started the United We Stand fanzine, of course. So many books written and articles, really, really Mr. Manchester United, you could call him, and a really authoritative voice when it comes to talking about the club. And he said that this week, he said on Talk Sport that every previous Manchester United manager has told him in confidence that they have had issues with Marcus Rashford going back years and years and years. And that's what he's seeing with Amorim now, and questioning his professionalism and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was quite a fascinating insight.
Yeah.
Because it's something that's not labelled at Rashford. He cuts quite a sort of a humble and likeable figure, and I think has a lot of goodwill from people, just kind of the way, not just the school meal stuff, which was obviously very, very important, but the way he comes across. He comes across as a decent bloke. But very interesting comment from Andy Mitten there.
Yeah, I felt, when I see Marcus Rashford speak, he strikes me as someone who's very, very introverted. And he's also a very, very famous person who's kind of, put himself out there to do everything he did with the school meals, which is an amazing thing. And I can't help feel that with Marcus Rashford, he's been surrounded by a lot of PR people for a long time. And he's obviously got a team of people who advise him. And I feel like he's been given a lot of very poor advice. I think this interview he did after Amorim left him out of the team is an example of someone just... That feels to me like it's poor advice that's come from somewhere else, because it seems like a really illogical thing to do. It seems like, for whatever reason, he's very, very disillusioned at Man United. This, as I'm sure a lot of players are. I know he suffered a bereavement not long ago, in the scale of how long those things last in terms of an impact, which is obviously a very, very difficult thing to deal with, again, when you're in the limelight and you're in a sort of chaotic situation like this. So I'm kind of hesitant to be too critical of Rashford, because I think he's under a spotlight that a lot of people aren't. But at the same time, you have to look at the impact he's essentially ceased to make on the pitch, and kind of wonder why it is that he doesn't seem that invested in turning it around. It's an unusual set of circumstances, isn't it?
It is. And if he doesn't go in January, then perhaps we'll see him in the summer, but then contract situation and wages and all this kind of stuff comes into play, of course.
Yeah, I mean, if the wages he's on are, if they're anything like what they're reported to be, it's going to make it a really difficult situation, isn't it? He's surely going to have to go on loan somewhere and dazzle for it to materialise into a good move for him.
Indeed. We should turn our attention back to Newcastle United, because they were very good tonight.
They were flawless, really.
Yeah, and they're really buzzing. All 10 of Newcastle's outfield players registered a shot or created a chance in that first half against Manchester United. In the early stages of this Premier League season, after a handful of games or so, we were suggesting that Eddie Howe's job might come under the spotlight again, or Eddie Howe would rather. You go back to when they lost at Fulham, and they were piss poor, quite frankly. They weren't great around that time. They looked tired. They looked a bit disjointed, and I thought, come Christmas time, Howe might be under a bit of pressure. Well, now look at them. I don't know what he's doing. Maybe they've had a good old glug of Carabao or something, but they're flying. They are up there. They're challenging for Champions League. They're into fifth, with Chelsea dropping points. They're 3 points behind Chelsea. And much has been made of Chelsea's season. We'll talk about Chelsea in just a sec.
It's also 14 goals without reply in the last 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Newcastle.
Very, very impressive from Newcastle. Anthony Gordon looks like he's got his real zip back about him. At the start of the season, it was terrible, but you look at Gordon now, he's there. Isak looks like one of the best centre-forwards in the world right now.
He genuinely does. He's just the glide on him.
Yeah,
those legs. There are some players where, having that sort of height and having legs that long actually makes them a little bit cumbersome, but there's a kind of elegance to the way he moves and the way he uses those legs to essentially make it really difficult for defenders to get around him. He's sort of like, I'm gonna don't want to go too far back in time here, but I'm gonna. He moves like Georgie Kincladze.
Oh,
but
what a reference!
But he's about 9 feet tall.
Jim, you have
amazing stuff.
Very eloquently said he's got a good touch for a big man. That's what you've just done.
I have.
You're right though. He's very silky, is Isak, and a player like him, you would think, would be a wide forward, a bit jinky and a bit tricky. But he also has the attributes of a proper centre forward. He can lead the line. You see him winning headers and all that, using that height of his. My goodness, he can finish. His
link-up play's brilliant as well.
Got the lot.
And also the 2 fullbacks, 2 young fullbacks, Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento, which means Tino Deliverance in Portuguese, apparently, which is fantastic and appropriate. I mean, they've been excellent as well. So I don't know. Do you think is it just the right amount of players hitting form at the same time, which obviously Howe deserves credit for?
Quite possibly. I mean, you even see Kieran Trippier back in there, and I know against Manchester United he's not really tested
shooting
that
from
much.
Corners.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but even Trippier looks like he's re-energised. Obviously, had a long slog in the summer and came back. Maybe they just have. But the midfield looks very, very solid, I suppose. But I was going to say punchy, but with 1 or 2 of those players in there, that might be a bit too literal, perhaps. But they look good, and they're hitting form at a nice time. They've given themselves a huge boost of confidence and a huge shot in the arm as they go up the table, of course. And if you look at that pack that's below them, Man City, Bournemouth, Fulham, Villa, who's struggling a little bit, Brighton, and you're down to Spurs, Brentford. I tell you what, you would fancy Newcastle, now that there's 5 places up for grabs, you'd fancy them to get a Champions League spot, which is an incredible turnaround from not that long ago when we were saying, is it mid-table obscurity for them this season?
Well, it's just about keeping it up, isn't it? And keeping it consistent, which has been the issue for them in the last couple of seasons, really. January's big if they can actually sign someone. There's been a lot of talk, isn't there, about, they're going to have to sell players, but everyone involved in the club is saying that's not actually true. So, they've got a really, really solid foundation here. That midfield trio is brilliant, obviously. And, we've seen Sean Longstaff is capable of putting runs of really good form together as well. So, yeah, it's an exciting time to be a Geordie, I would imagine.
It is, and defensively look pretty sound as well. Are you concerned?
Yeah, with Sven Botman still to come back.
Yes,
as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Are you concerned, Jim, that Arsenal have to face Newcastle in the Carabao Cup semi-final?
Well, Marcus. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a horrible place to go. Horrible place to go.
In footballing terms, Jim, it's a fine city.
Footballing terms, lovely place to go otherwise.
Yeah, genuinely. But we should say, though, that the Carabao Cup semi-finals will see the trial of in-stadium VAR announcements from the referee. Spurs v Liverpool 2.
Marcus, this has been floated for a long time, and only you and I were wise enough to see what an unmitigated disaster this is going to be. So I'm surprised it's come around this quickly.
Yeah, look, it has been tried. If you remember it in the Women's World Cup in Australia, which was quite successful.
The crowds are quite different, aren't they?
The crowds are different. It is very, very important to say that. I would say, with pretty firm authority, without having done much research or more research than your average footballer, there are fewer dickheads at women's football matches than there are at men's. Okay, so I think I don't think anyone's going to pick me up for that point.
This is going to be amazing.
It's going to be good.
This is going to be absolutely amazing, especially when they get a big one wrong, which they will.
Oh yeah,
because we've seen it happen every season.
Yes, and if I was working for Pugmol, I would be saying, can we get someone else to do that announcement? Like, can
we
we
get a specialist guy?
Can we get like a voiceover actor? You know, the guy who does X Factor. Can we get him?
Peter Dixon.
Yeah, get Peter Dixon. Get like, and the decision is red card. And everyone will go, well, I can't really argue with Peter Dixon on that, can I? Brian Blessed, anybody, somebody.
Yeah.
You know, but poor refs, the stuff they're being asked to do.
No, they already get so much abuse.
It's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It is a shame that we've not. It's a shame that Mike Dean's gone, isn't it? Just as this comes in, because that would have been spectacular.
Get him to do it. He'd be up for that.
Oh, yeah. You know what? You're right. He would be up for it.
Yeah.
It's not like he's got to run around, is it? You just got to announce a decision. Get him in there.
Oh, dear.